If there's one question organizations ask us, it's how do I create policy around AI use? So today on the podcast, I'm bringing you guests that are going to share what questions we should be asking to ensure safe and ethical use to maximize the productivity and creativity benefits of using AI in our organizations.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools.
Earlier this month, we released our report, From Insight to Implementation, How to Co-Create Your AI Guidance. And in this report, we discuss how to take a human-centered approach to making this a community-building exercise. After having worked with Santa Ana Unified on building theirs, we share with you our process, recommended steps, so that you can take these same steps to create yours. The report includes an overview of existing guidances, which, by the way, only 7 of the states here in the US have issued guidance, with 7 saying they have absolutely no plans to do so, which means that even though ChatGPT launched over a year and a half ago, less than 20% of the country has issued any guidance or clarity about what's next. The unanimous ask is for clarity. Why? Because clarity prevents confusion. And it also helps build confidence. When people feel confident, they feel safe to try new things and to share their experiences. In Grammarly's report on the state of business communication in 2024, they share that 80% of workers say that it improves their work, but 65% worry about security. Microsoft shared a similar report looking at education, where leaders and educators clearly see the benefits, but there is overwhelming confusion around cheating amongst leaders, educators, and students. Their recommendation aligns with what we've been sharing here at Designing Schools with all of our partners, the need to create both policy and guidelines. Now, policies can be updated, but guidelines are your opportunity to bring your community together to share experiences, use cases, concerns, fears, but more importantly, to align on shared norms and values and a vision for what comes next and the support that everyone needs to feel successful. As we work with organizations on guidelines, one of our core partners is Gretchen Shipley, who specializes in education law. Now, a marker of expertise for me is being able to take really complex topics and simplify them so that the people listening feel really confident about being able to plan their next steps. And as you'll hear, Gretchen displays this expertise. She works with school districts in California and nationwide on data privacy, cybersecurity, and safety issues, and on the promotion of cyber citizenship in the community. One of her latest cases was with the California School Boards Association that she just won in a recent Supreme Court decision. Let's welcome Gretchen to the show.
Thank you so much. At F3 Law, we had the opportunity to represent the California School Board Association on a case before the U.S. Supreme Court on school board member use of social media, and also it impacts school district administrators' use of social media. And it was a unanimous decision for the U.S. Supreme Court and impacts school administrators and school boards nationwide, and it gives them back control of their social media. And it was really exciting, and it just happened this week. So thank you for the shout out.
Yeah, of course. No, congratulations. And it's interesting, we're seeing right now so many things with social media, and now we have AI. And that's how I first came to know you. I was absolutely blown away by your presentations. I've seen a couple of times seen you present, and I was really blown away by the simplicity of your style for such a complex topic, which I think is one of the things that's a real marker of expertise. Like, it's easy to throw out the buzzwords. It's very difficult to come in front of an audience and really help them understand things that is many people feel it's very, very, very complex right now. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing with AI, with the different people that you're working with.
Absolutely. So I work with school administrators. I'm an education lawyer. That's all we do here. And they're busy, they're overwhelmed, they have a lot going on at any given time. And so our goal is to partner with them, but also give them the most critical pieces of information in the most practical way possible. Like, I know the history of the case law but they don't necessarily need or want to know all of that. It's just how do we apply it and what do we need to do in the classroom? So one thing that we've been doing with AI, so I chair a practice dedicated to education technology. So whether it's social media or AI, any emerging technology, it's the law certainly has not caught up. FERPA, the Privacy Act for Student Records, is from the 1960s. So what we try to do is help assist and partner school districts with how to apply emerging technology and not to be afraid of it, how to implement it, but in a responsible way. So how do you do that? It's usually drafting policies or guidelines, or working with, trainings, or working with their teams and their cabinets to develop, guidelines and parameters.
And I think that's one of the things that makes this time like so tricky for so many is we don't have sort of like the government law policy to look to guide us that's able to keep up fast enough with these emerging technologies. And as you pointed out, people are feeling so overwhelmed with what they already have. And one of the things that you highlight, sort of like in your opening is the idea that AI is not an IT issue, right? The idea that like, whereas technologies previously may have fallen under just like that one umbrella, you say this one is different. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So we work, one big chunk of our work is data privacy. And usually data privacy evaluation is done through IT, or software adoption for a school district is, curriculum instruction might identify what software they want to use, but IT is in charge of implementing it. So sometimes the natural reaction is, oh, it's a technology, send it to IT to review. But as we know, AI in its many potential applications and capabilities, it impacts every area of district operations. So when we're talking about adopting AI, all those areas of a school district cabinet really should be a part of the conversation. And do you mind if I give a few examples?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
please.
So for example, the business and operations department. Well, those are the people who review contracts. I mean, a software agreement, accepting those terms and conditions, that's a contract. So your business department needs to be a part of that discussion, but also the 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 opportunities to streamline business operations is something that's really taking off. There's a lot of AI consultants out there talking to them about how they can. I mean, unfortunately, with this economy, there's a lot of condensing of district positions. And so they're looking for ways to build in efficiencies. Well, AI can do some work more efficiently, but we need to make sure that it's safe, that it has data privacy, that it is accurate. There's all these safeguards that needs to go in place. So that's just the business office. Special ed, for example, they're not often included in the conversation, but AI can be used as an accommodation, whether, let's say it's a note-taking app. So there might be requests from parents or the special ed administrators. We have seen special ed staff wanting to use it to draft IEPs. And one of the concerns there would be personally identifiable information going into an open generative AI. So it's about bringing them to the table, help educating them on how to implement AI, but do it in a safe and responsible way. And it's okay. And then staff, obviously students might be using it for either educational purposes or potentially misconduct, in which case that's part of your acceptable use policy. That's part of your code of conduct. Your staff members, though, we have heard some rumblings about whether or not, and staff are often the ones wanting to implement in the classroom. And I'm not the person to say, teachers shouldn't be innovative. I applaud that. It's just want to make sure that it is a safe tool and that someone has vetted it. But also, some districts, there's been some feedback about whether or not it's a labor issue, something that needs to be bargained with the bargaining unit. And so again, all the more reason why to have HR at the table. Professional development, I could see when they do their annual professional development and doing some training with staff about adopting new technologies in the classroom and different steps. I mean, obviously leadership, it all falls under that umbrella, and IT should be there. And part of IT too is usually they're the ones doing the data privacy review. So that's obviously an important step. But I think I've hit every area of cabinet. I don't know that there's anybody I've left out, but it just, where we see the questions coming, and that's what I do day in, day out. I get phone calls about, we want to use this application, can you review the contract, or is this, and it's from all areas of district operations, network monitoring, threat assessment tools, counseling services. So it's great in that we can be so much more effective and efficient, but in all areas of district operations, but we all need to be on the same page on the process and protocols for its adoption.
Absolutely. And I think that goes right back to like what you said initially, right? Like it's not just an IT issue. Bring your stakeholders to the table and have that conversation so that you can quickly not feel like it's one person's responsibility. So I would love to kind of just go through like maybe like three different scenarios with you from some of the most common things that we see. And the first one is, a lot of these ed tech companies directly market to teachers. And, I sort of call it this like, there's a lot of like emotional marketing at play around burnout and feeling overwhelmed, which is extremely valid. Yet, if you're a teacher feeling that way, and here's this ed tech company marketing its AI tool for you for lesson planning, for grading, for all of these different pieces. And I'm like, oh my goodness, amazing. It's an education tool. I'm going to download it. I'm going to maybe even pay for it. What do you think that person should consider in that scenario?
So one of the concerns with, so first of all, my catchphrase is ask before you app.
And I love that.
I have a cute little video. It's free on my website, 5 minutes, and it's called Ask Before You App. And the reason is free isn't free. There is, I'm not saying they shouldn't use the applications. They just need to be reviewed for safety. So there's a few things. So software companies are a business. And if they are offering something for free, it very well mean the way that they make money is that they are either taking the data they collect and selling it, or they are directly advertising to students. And both of those are not legal in the educational context. So I know no teacher would intentionally try to violate a kid's privacy, but the fine print is, the devil's in the details. And so it's ask before you app is what questions should we be asking? So most school districts, they all should have a vetting process for apps, for software that they use. And so teachers need to be made aware of what is that process, who should they be asking the questions to, and very often they've already been vetted, by another, you could get the green light, no problem, but at least ask the questions, because I just don't want a teacher to inadvertently introduce something in the classroom where all the students' data is being shared, which would potentially violate their educational rights. So you just need to make sure that the data privacy protections are in there. And, but otherwise, there's gonna be more and more of this. And so so for the administration, I want to tell them, make sure you have a protocol in place to evaluate these tools, and then make sure the staff is educated and knows that they need to follow that process.
Absolutely. And what are some of those questions, like maybe like your top three questions people should ask as they look at these terms of service or these different areas to be like, oh, that's something I should be looking out for?
So one is it open or closed AI? So, and this might be more of a, the business or IT department question, but if it is open generative AI, we assume that it's being reshared. If it's closed universe, it may just be staying within your school system. So that's a much different impact on their privacy rights. So I think that's kind of a threshold question.
And is that something that's normally put into their terms of service?
I've seen it. I mean, again, this is all new. They are
Yeah.
not usually very express on the technical side of it.
So this is like if you're going in to have a conversation maybe with a vendor. So like these questions could actually be used twofold, like whether you're looking at terms of service or maybe whether you're going in to have a conversation with a vendor.
Absolutely. It's
Oh,
a great vendor
amazing.
question. You need to make
Okay.
sure what data is being collected and who is it being reshared with. It's okay if it's just being shared with their sub-processors, but if it's being reshared in open generative AI, you may need parental consent. And that's why that makes a difference, who it's being reshared with. You may need parent permission. Typically, educational software is used just within the school system and doesn't require parent permission. But if it's open generative AI, that might change the district's permission requirements. And so it's an important threshold question to ask. So
Wow.
is it open or generative? What data is being collected? Is it de-identified? That also might help protect the students. And who is it being reshared with? Yeah, those are my top three.
And then again, those are things that may or may not be found in the actual TOS or things like that. So that's where that protocol then becomes even more essential.
Well, and I have personal experience with this. It is the terms of service can be, or the scope of work or whatever it is, could be one page, and they razzle dazzle you with its amazing applications. Like I said, the devil's in the details. For example, there are school camera security systems that will, help stop school shootings, and they can help stop, identify human trafficking. And it's fantastic. Of course, we want to stop school shootings and human trafficking, but they're using AI and facial recognition and license plate readers and biometric data. And sometimes the school district didn't know that until they asked for a copy of the 56-page contract. The vendor didn't even really send that part to the IT department to review. We went ahead and took a look at it and saw that and said, before you implement this program, you really might want to look at what data is being collected and what they're doing with it, and how the community would respond to that. And in that particular case, the school district put the brakes on it. But again, that's not my objective. My objective is just to make sure that school districts are fully informed about what it is the technology is capable of, before they adopt it. Ideally, before they adopt it.
So one of the things that, and I'm glad you made that connection between social media and AI, because I actually just heard another interview with a Gen Z, sort of like, she's a young speaker who just sort of speaks on
What,
like,
what are you
different
trying to
Gen Z.
say, Saba?
No, oh my You're so funny. No, so no, but she's sort of like one of those like Gen Z speakers, for like their generation, the different challenges. And it was really interesting to me in her interview. And I'll be, very honest in sharing, like, I didn't really realize the degree to which children are really advertised to. And we know like the role that AI plays in targeted marketing and things like, that's one of the AI like elements that we've had in our lives for quite a while now. And so I'm kind of curious, like I always wonder like how how are more people not talking about that, a decade ago in terms of AI advertising, social media, kids and things like that. And I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that from like the legal perspective.
So what's really interesting is, so I do practice around the country, but I'm based here in California. California, in the education environment, has an express prohibition against targeted advertising to students.
Wow.
So educational software programs that are used in the classroom do not have targeted advertising to students. It might be a general advertisement, but it is not supposed to use their information to advertise directly to them. So as a school district, that is one of the review pieces that they are reviewing to make sure that there's a prohibition against targeted advertising. Now that might be permitted in other states, which is why the software company might not be wired to prohibit targeted advertising. That's why you have to do a state-specific safety review. But we also sort of did a national data privacy agreement that incorporates that term as well. So in the educational context, your educational software should not have targeted advertising. It's another reason why staff members should probably ask somebody before they implement the software. But the other piece is, things like AI are not specifically geared towards education, so they won't have those safety measures put into place. It's another reason why a school district might want to do that safety review, to know that they're really not supposed to allow targeted advertising. So that's something that they would also take a look at. But the software company or the AI software platform isn't wired that way. So it's incumbent upon the school districts right now to make sure that the tools they're introducing to students are safe, protect the students. I do think that there's legislation coming down the pike that's going to put more responsibility on the software companies, but it's just not there yet.
And that's not something that extends to sort of like the consumer realm. So like
Right.
if I'm a 13-year-old downloading Instagram, and like Talkspace actually is the one that she calls out a lot in there, they're not obliged by any sort of like, data privacy protections for students in terms of what they can advertise to students, or, Kim Kardashian or any of these other sort of people.
I don't want to get in the crosshairs of Kim K. She's a lawyer too, So the one thing I will say is, my focus primarily is in the educational sector. Um, as we know, as consumers, I'm targeted advertised. I can think something and I get an advertisement. So it's there. I mean, and I have three children, teenagers, preteens, and they're on their social media platforms, whether, they're targeted advertised all day long. So I don't know expressly the software companies, what they're for general consumer age division, but I do know, I know in the education sector that it's prohibited.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just think it's such an interesting like area where like our lawmakers have not sort of just said like, hey, this is a blanket, policy across the board for people. So let me go
It's
ahead and
big business,
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So
gaming, all of that. It all incorporates advertising,
yeah,
whether it's an adult or a student, and that's how they make their money.
no, absolutely. So let's go into the adult realm for a moment. So let's say like I'm a principal, superintendent, administrator, and I want to use, Chat GPT for my letters of rec and my evals and SMART goals, or just like LCAPs and all these other things I'm doing. I log on and I'm purchasing Chat GPT. What are some things they should be thinking about?
A school principal?
Yeah, like, just as part of, like, at the end of the day, you're still working with student data maybe, you're still working with, like, there are still confidential documents. Maybe you're thinking, "Oh, I'm not using it with a student, I'm just using it for,
Right.
IEP, I'm using it for LCAP, I'm using it for, writing my reviews," or, just the other kinds of tasks it is that people do.
I would say the easiest takeaway. I mean, I know many school districts are in the process of developing the policies or their guidelines, but the most immediate call of action is for open generative AI, like ChatGPT. If it's set up, some have privacy settings, but just generally speaking, open generative AI, no PII, no personally identifiable information. So you mentioned IEP. You do not want to load into ChatGPT a student's name, their disability status, their medical accommodations. That would violate their privacy. And so, I mean, I work with some school districts that are using it for payroll processing. I'm like, is that their bank account information? There's really highly sensitive information that school districts work with. Or, if you're a principal, it may be you want to do a draft letter of reprimand against a teacher. Well, that's their personnel record. Or a letter to a parent about a student. Also, you just need to, when it's open generative AI, it is being reshared with the universe. And so no personally identifiable information should ever be entered.
No, absolutely. And I remember my big aha moment was the first time I listened to you was I used the meeting note taker, and, here, like, oh my God, amazing. Like I get to be more present now with the people that I'm meeting with. And, it's going to take my notes for me. And it was really only after listening to you that I started adding a disclaimer onto my, calendar invites now. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, because again,
Sure.
innocent mistake. We're trying to get the better outcomes. We're aiming for better relationships, being more present, yet whoops, this one overlooked element might, catch up with you down the line.
So, and note-taking applications, again, have the ability to revolutionize whether it's business operations or even if it's an accommodation in the classroom or students are using it. Um, but great question. So there's a few things. You're not supposed to record people without putting them on notice, especially in California. Now, this is sort of like an eavesdropping law. It's like it's like criminal to record somebody without posting a sign and saying, you're being recorded. So that is really important. Most of the platforms have a pop-up notice that this is going to be recorded. But what we have seen is, like, again, I'm a lawyer. My communications with school districts should be confidential to protect that attorney-client privilege. but also we've had a confidential settlement conference with in a special education hearing with a parent, and the parent recorded it and didn't tell anybody. And afterwards, it sent us these great notes, really well organized, really comprehensive. We appreciated that part, but it was a confidential settlement conference, and the parent was recording it, not telling anybody, except that it auto generates usually to all the attendees some notes. And I think she didn't even mean to send the notes. So note-taking apps, many of the software platforms are doing quick updates to not reshare the data. I mean, and put protections in place where you're not breaking confidentiality. But I think that the questions would be, does it have, is notice provided? Ideally, you'd get the person's permission. In the case of teachers, they really, with distance learning, this kind of went back and forth, whether teachers have to provide permission to be recorded in the classroom. That's something I'd encourage school districts to talk to their own legal counsel about, because it used to be that teachers had to give permission before they could be recorded by students. And then when distance learning came along, there was a shift because we had to deliver online instruction. Anyway, I digress. But is there a notice? Do you need permission? I recommend it. And is it confidential communications? I mean, in all likelihood, it is going to be sensitive data that you're sharing. So how is it being reshared? Is it open generative AI, or is it just closed to the people receiving the notes?
And seems like everything, like all roads leads back to, is it open or is it closed? And like that just becomes, I think, just a really important question. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway probably for so many people here. So we're so excited to be partnering with you, with Santa Ana and, I imagine many more, to really be able to look at how people go about creating these protocols, creating these policies and guidelines, and really just the importance of having those different layers of expertise. And I would love for you to be able to share just what are some of those things that you think people that, leaders and administrators, districts, schools should consider as, when they think about policy, because so often it's a big question. It's one where, there's not a lot of guidance at all on from any sort of stakeholder or like, the people they typically look to. So what is something you think people should have on their radar?
Sure. And, you and I have worked together. When you bring stakeholders together, there's many different perspectives that should be considered going into these policies. My lens is mostly legal and how to prevent legal liability. So that's sort of where my focus is. But so, I'm going to share kind of 7 areas that I like to see incorporated into policy, but there could be much more. And I guess foundation of what I'm saying is how important it is to bring, I think what we're both saying is to bring all your stakeholder groups to the conversation. So a few areas that I like to start with at the beginning, and we didn't do a deep dive on the mechanics of how AI works. I'm not a technology professional, I'm just a lawyer, but few things to consider. Equity. AI tools, making sure that we are making them available to students on an equitable basis. So some tools go directly to student cell phones. It's a chat bot that they can interact with. Well, not every student has a cell phone. So if you're going to be deploying that, make sure it's available to all students in another format. It could be maybe they have one-to-one devices, like a laptop or Chromebook or something, or is it available on your website? So equity is really important. And I am doing a high-level review. These are really substantive, controversial issues, equity and bias and things of that area. But at a minimum, I just want to flag them for you as something to evaluate as you're doing your policy. So equity. And then I mentioned the second one is bias. I think it's incumbent on staff to make sure that, so if staff is using AI to generate a lesson plan, they still need to ensure that the content they are delivering to students is free of bias. The internet is inherently biased. AI is scraping information from the internet. We have absolutely seen very clear examples of where the content that is created by AI is biased. And so it's really important that what is going into the minds of children is free of bias, and that we have that layer of review. So that's, again, probably part of their professional development or a part of their policy. Maybe it's in their guidelines or their policy, which then you provide professional development to make sure they really understand how to apply that. Very similar is accuracy. I don't know. You probably have some stories too about how silly, inaccurate the what is generated from AI could be. So, you know, as you know, AI hallucinates. When it doesn't know the answer, it makes it up. In my profession, that means it makes up case names and makes up sites. So again, obviously, we want teachers to be providing accurate information to students. So if they're using it to create a subplan or a lesson plan, it is incumbent on the staff member to make sure that the content is accurate. So having a process in place in your policy to do that second layer of review. Sorry, I have 7 areas, so I'm just going to keep rolling on, but jump in if you want.
This is what people are here for. I mean, like I said, this is the information that I feel like so many people really, really, really want to hear. And I don't know, this is why this is why I love bringing you everywhere I can and everywhere I go, because I think it's so important to get this clarity. Because honestly, once you get that clarity, you get the confidence. And once you have the confidence, you can move forward with getting the outcomes it is that you are hoping for. So please, let's keep going.
Oh, absolutely. I want people to use this information and start these conversations and get their plans in place. Okay, so area 4 is the data privacy evaluation. That's something that I've been talking about throughout. So making sure we have language in there about what is your process for staff, for the business team, for the IT team, who is reviewing it to make sure that it is safe for students and not violating their privacy. And then part and parcel with that, the 5th component is whether permission is needed, any sort of permissions, whether it's a note-taking app, whether it is parental consent, if it's open generative AI. And then I mentioned HR. You know, my 6th tip is what is staff responsibilities? Is in whether or not any aspect of this needs to be bargained with their collective bargaining unit. If it, you know, impacts the working conditions of their job, their prep time, anything like that, you may need to include your labor unions in the conversation. And then finally, I think the one that is the most usually is on the forefront of most people's mind is the potential for misconduct. You know, let's make sure we put language in our acceptable use policy or our code of conduct that tells students, you know, academic honesty, you know, only use it with teacher permission. You know, there's a lot of controversy around deep fakes and how to identify misinformation. So again, obviously the misconduct component needs to come into your AI needs to be incorporated into acceptable use of technology policies or your code of conduct.
In a world where technology is rapidly accelerating, it is absolutely essential to have teams that can lend this different area of expertise. And if Gretchen is an expert in education law, Stefan Bouchard, our Chief AI Officer here at Designing Schools, is an expert in AI. He shares the 3 areas of consideration that schools should consider when designing policy.
I think there are a few important things that people should consider when drafting a guidance. The first is not just where the technology is, but where the technology is going. You know, in November of 2022, we had the release of ChatGPT, which is really just a text exchange that you could have with it. Then we saw ChatGPT 4, where you could do all types of stuff with data and images, and different technologies got woven in. Now we see more advanced systems, even like coming out in Anthropic's Claude and Google's Gemini, and the technology just keeps advancing. They're already talking about, as we referenced in our report, autonomous agents, where all these AIs are going to be able to work together, make their own decisions in the context of education to help support students. And we really want to be forward thinking because, first of all, our students are going to graduate depending on where they are in school. They might not graduate for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You want to be looking ahead and thinking, how can we prepare our students for that world? And the second, in any institution, it takes a while to get professional development organized, to get people trained, to think about how people are going to use it in the classroom. And you can't just be thinking about what the technology is now and planning for that now, because if you do the professional development in 6 months, not only the teachers already be behind, but they're not going to be prepared for what's going to happen a year from now. So while you're not looking to adapt to every single technological change, you want the professional development to be relevant, not only to today, but also to the future. I think the second thing is, a lot of people, when they think about AI guidance, it applies to the entire educational system. And a lot of what schools are already doing helps students to prepare for, a world of more artificial intelligence. We're always talking about deep learning and AI, Of course, we know there's deep learning and education. I've been involved in, helping students with debate for a long time. There's entrepreneurship programs, STEM programs. I know, Saba, you've been helping students develop portfolios. Those are all projects and programs that everybody thinks are important for the future, even regardless of how much of it AI is interwoven into the future. And, one of the states in particular, North Carolina, they really emphasize that in their guidance. So I don't think we want to be thinking only about AI when we're thinking about an AI guidance. And then the third thing is, as I just referenced, AI is a general purpose technology. It affects everything, right? From classroom instructions to the way the students are organized to different roles that people have. And you need to involve the whole team, not just people on the technology side. You want to involve teaching and learning. You want to involve legal. You want to involve technical. Teaching and learning, along with the leadership, they're really the visionaries, right? They're thinking like, gee, how do we ultimately really want to educate our students, not just for today? How do we want to maybe improve our practice, but for tomorrow? And then, of course, the technical people, the ones that make sure everything's going to happen. Okay, what can these applications actually do? How can they do it safely? And how can they do it in the best way possible? And of course, we don't always like the laws, but we have to comply with them. So we need support from legal counsel, especially in relationship to a new technology. Those laws are going to have to, regulations are going to have to be interpreted and suggested. And I'm sure they're following the laws, the way the laws are developing, and maybe the way they've been applied. And we're going to have to turn to them continually for a lot of support in this area. So, those are kind of the three main areas I think people should look at. Be forward thinking, think about what doesn't involve AI, and then really think about involving the whole team. And, Saba, too, I mentioned, kind of all the adults in the room, but also going to the kids, what do they want to learn, what their lives are like. One thing I've learned, and I still can't really fully experience it, is, kids are almost living in another world. They're getting all the news from TikTok and Twitter, and they just kind of developed a different understanding of the world than maybe what we have. So engaging in them in that conversation is essential.
Like Gretchen and so many others share, the importance of bringing together a team of stakeholders to co-create guidance is a community-building activity. With the report in one hand and this conversation with Gretchen, Stefan is going to share why he encourages organizations and leaders to embrace designing a guidance for their organization.
I really encourage schools to, take the plunge and draft a guidance. I think a lot of schools are a little hesitant to draft a guidance because, they say, well, our state hasn't issued any guidance yet. Okay, well, there's a lot of states to look at, international, other countries, educational institutions that have done guidance, and we've consolidated those in our report. And there are a lot of common themes and ideas that when your state issues a guidance, those will probably be in there, a lot of them. So I think that's a safe place to start. Second is people are just looking for guidance, right? If you're an educational leader and you're looking for your state for guidance, imagine what your teachers are also looking for, right? They're looking for guidance. They know the students are using AI one way or another. There's all these debates about how much they're using it and all these different shapes and forms, but everybody knows they're using it. And probably in a mix of different ways, whether we want to accept it or not. So really kind of going through the process of the guidance gives you an opportunity to think through these issues, gives you an opportunity to educate yourself, and it gives you an opportunity to work with your colleagues and your students. So that is valuable regardless of what's in the guidance. To really start, AI has caused a lot of people to start addressing like fundamental questions like, gee, why, what is the purpose of education? Why are we here? What are our students learning? Why are they learning these things? At what rate are they learning these things? Maybe what other things should they be learning? All these things that are just kind of percolated up kind of out of the street a bit, and they all need addressed. They're all important conversations to have. They're all conversations where you're not going to have a final answer. So I really just encourage you to embrace the process of developing a guidance. I know come, September 2024, a lot of people are going to be looking for guidance. Parents are going to be asking more detailed questions about, all right, well, what's acceptable for my son or daughter to use or not.
As always, you will find the links to the resources mentioned in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about our human-centered approach to AI and how we're working with organizations, helping them navigate AI using design thinking principles so that they are building a culture of innovation that builds trust, encourages creativity, while keeping safety and ethics at the forefront, you'll find the link in the show notes where you're able to schedule a call with us. Remember, with clarity comes confidence, and with confidence comes a community who is ready to lead with their human advantage in an AI world.
It's your turn to join the conversation. by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.